Hey friends, Clay here. Wanted to let you know that towards the end of the episode, we had a technical audio issue when we were recording. We are aware of this, but the rest of the content and the time with Kay was so rich and special that we wanted to release the episode. But just wanted to give you a heads up that we're aware and let you know that's coming. Recording in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Welcome to the Restoration Group podcast, where we are sometimes silly, but we are always serious about investing in Oklahoma City leaders who desire to integrate their Christian faith into their business. I am your host, Clay Steves, and today I am joined by my co-host, Aaron Scott, and our returning guest. That's right, coming back for another victory lap, Kay Gackle. Kay, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Let's hope it's a victory lap. Let's go with that.
It's already a victory lap. We're already running that lap. All right. Okay. So listeners, viewers, episode 8, go back. You can listen to Kay's wisdom that she shared with us the first time, which I'll personally go there right now. I've sat on Kay's couch many a times, and you'll get into why I've been on Kay's couch in just a moment when I tell about her as a therapist. But she shares incredible health on wisdom and out of her book Numb, and much of the expertise she has shared with so many in Oklahoma City over the years in that first episode. So we're not going to revisit all that today. You can go back and listen to it on the first one. Today we're going to jump into other subjects. But we'll start with the formal bio. Gotta love the formal bio. Okay, so we'll read this one first. All right. Okay. Kay loves Jesus. She loves her husband of almost 21 years, her 18-year-old son who will be leaving for college later this year. Ooh, we'll process that if we need to. But you made the face. Yep. And a now double-digit 10-year-old daughter. She is privileged to do a job where brave people let her have a front row seat on their journey to find healing. That's right, find healing. She is passionate about people not ignoring or disliking their feelings. You believe that you can help them find freedom, make intentional choices, and worship God. Born and raised in Florida, you've now lived in Oklahoma for 8 years. Come on now, right? And your family is blessed. Yeah. To say we have multiple places that you call home, including Oklahoma. Kay, so good to have you back. So good to have you back.
Wait, that was the formal bio. What's the informal bio?
I don't know.
Kay, what's the informal bio? I don't have one.
I'm going to go with the first sentence is the same. I love Jesus. Let's go with that. I feel like that's solid.
Yeah, feels right.
Solid. Informal, formal, all the ways. Let's see. Informal. I think one of the things that I would say that would never be in an informal bio or a formal bio is that I have recently come to really love working with young adults.
Is that why I've been seeing you? Because I'm a young adult?
Aaron, you're not a young adult.
That is such great news.
Oh, that's funny.
I feel so good about myself.
How we identify. I don't know. Maybe it's not so much about age. I don't know. Young at heart.
Oh, that's so.
Okay. All right. Well, that informal bio was both great and hard to hear, but excited for you.
I like working with all ages, but I think young adults are like at such sweet time of life, right? They're like just starting out. They're in their early 20s. They're leaving their family of origin. So figuring out what to take from that, what to leave behind, like figuring out how to enter the workforce. I mean, kind of what you're talking about here on your podcast of like, okay, how do we do this well? What does that look like? And so that stage of life is just such a sweet thing, you know?
Yes, I can remember it long, long ago. I'm also like, wait, you don't think the stage of life I'm in is super sweet? Like, it's so weird. As much information as you know about me and my life, Kay, I'm shocked that you would not use. You said, oh gosh. Yeah. This episode has the potential to turn into a time that I actually need to like pay Kay for. So we should be really careful there. It's just definitely possible.
Watch to see if she flips on the clock at some point. Like, wow, this turned into billable hours very quickly. Yes, it did. So on that note,
you can go wherever you guys want to go.
So before we turn on that clock, why don't you tell us about your practice? Why don't you tell us about your practice and how you got into it, Kay?
So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I felt like God was calling me way back in 2002. So before I even journeyed into the idea of grad school, and there was an Isaiah passage, and God was just talking about satisfying the needs of the oppressed and really helping people, and to be a restorer of
Mm.
broken walls and a restorer of broken streets, and help the people rebuild their cities. And so God really used that time to really build my own personal mission, which I just feel like is to help people be healthy enough to hear from God. And
Ooh.
so through all of that, I just feel like God's given me different platforms, different offices, different focus in different areas and different times of my life. And so just kind of like following him along and seeing what he's putting in front of me to kind of face and deal with. And I usually have to end up reconciling it in my life before I help people. So that's another way that God has worked in my life. So not always the funnest, but I think it is a really sweet thing.
What's the name of your practice? Or the
I work in Transforming Life Counseling Center, but we each have our own businesses within that, if that makes sense.
So you each have your own,
I guess.
Okay.
Trademark. It just happened live.
Actually, Erin is actually getting that LLC right now. So if you don't own it, she's going to own it soon, and you guys can work that out.
No,
later.
I do actually have an LLC, so I'll fight you for it, Erin.
Oh, you beat me to it. Clay acts like I know how to apply for an LLC.
That's good. That's good. Go ahead, E.
Okay, well, in talking about, you were mentioning specifically young adults, but this would apply for all age ranges, even those of us who sadly do not fall in the young adult range. You were just talking about the season of life they're going out on their own and all those things, which is really, it can feel like and this is kind of how I'm going to tie in, it can feel like a really unsafe time or space or season, whatever verbiage we want to use there. So as far as like on the business side, what would be your recommendation? Because as employers, as a business, we have employees of all different seasons of life that might be finding that season to be an unsafe, let's call it season, whether that is young adult or maybe somebody in, I don't know what age range you're putting me in, who might be going through some other stuff, or later, even in life, like way, way later in life, like Clay, that much later in life, if you can imagine something that later. But as far as the fact that as a business, we can't control the environment that our employees have outside of work, what things, maybe unsafe things are happening outside of work, or even the business that we own, the environment, the factors outside of our control, external things, those could be unsafe. All that to say, what is your advice for how to create a safe work environment when all the things around may be unsafe?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And
thank
you're
you.
Right.
I did not write it, but thank you.
There was actually, going to your young adult thing though, I read one statistics where it said 7 in 10 employees want to have mental health as like part of a topic in their workplace. They desire it. They desire it to be spoken. And then the generational data, which I thought was fascinating, speaking to my young adult love, was 80% of Gen Zers and 69% of millennials, so wherever you find yourself, Erin, would fit into those categories of really hoping that it's going to be something that's talked about, valued in the workplaces. And so I think as we look at like business organizations, I mean, the reality is, Clay and I are probably on a downward slope at some point in our lives for work, but we really do need to create this environment. Sorry, Clay, I threw you with me.
It's all good.
But we do really need to create this environment for these 20s, 30s, like these people who are up and coming, and we want them to be able to help them, the next generation, right? So it kind of does start with where we are right now. And I think one of the ways we can do that is, when I think of the word safe, I'm trying to figure out like, for what does that mean for different people, right? Because I feel like there's physical safety, there's psychological safety, there's job safety. And what you're talking about too is like, how safe do they feel when they leave the office? And obviously, your job as a business owner would be to focus on what is it like in the business realm. And so, and I think what I can speak to is the psychological safety. And when I think of that, I think that's probably pretty much perception based, right? It's, I'm walking into a place and it's how I feel about my safety here. So all that to say is I think leaders really need to look at it on an individualized basis, because it's based on perception, and because some people in your workplace may say they feel really safe and some people may say they don't really feel safe. So where is that gap, and where do we see those markers? So like, do they feel safe in speaking up in a meeting? Do they feel safe to have a conflict conversation? Do they feel safe approaching their leader? And you can sort of watch. I mean, I'm sure you guys can attest to this. If you're ever in a business meeting, for me, it would be a group therapy session of just watching how people interact. And you can tell when someone is like, their body language sort of shuts down, or they're not really making eye contact with anybody, or they're not speaking up, or they're just not fully engaged in the conversation that's happening for whatever reason, right? And that could have something to do with work, or it could have something to do with home. And so again, this is why it has to be so individualized, I feel like. But as leaders, it can be really helpful if you just sort of watch and then enter in those conversations. It's sort of the same with remote employees. I have a couple people that I see remote, and it's even the same with them, right? We have to ask them and check in, like, hey, how is it for you to have these hard conversations on video, right? I mean, I can imagine, I can relate to that. Would be really hard to like enter in those hard conflict conversations on a video where you're missing out on so much of the body language and just I mean, if you're on a Zoom meeting, one person speaks and then another person speaks, and you can't really do that like banter or like jokey joke stuff, because there's just the time lag. It just makes it awkward, So checking in with people and just saying like, hey, I see you're not super engaged right now. Everything all right? And what can we do to sort of shore up that gap for you? Where are you feeling it? Where are you not feeling it? That kind of thing.
That's good. I wonder, man, as far as you're talking about it being individualized, really having to know your people, that gets more tedious and more difficult as your numbers grow, for you, like as the amount of clients you have grow, or for a business owner, the number of employees or clients, whichever way we're looking at it. And so any thoughts on how do you scale that as you get bigger and you might reach your capacity to like remember something about someone or to meet those individual needs, but you still have that desire. It just gets a little hard to manage when there's more people.
Yeah, there's, I think trust is the most measurable thing we can get here, right? So like, I read this one study where it talks about engagement in the workplace. And I feel like engagement in the workplace is sort of linked anyway to safety. Like how you are engaged is also linked to safety. And one of the measures they used was, they said they identified 3 trust levels. So you have your teammates, your team leaders, and then your senior leaders. And if they felt like they could trust 2 of the 3, they were pretty highly engaged in the workplace. So all that to say is the senior leader isn't probably going to be able to have that trust kind of with all the teammates. But the idea is that each level, or each people, at least 2 of the 3 levels that they can really trust. Meaning, do these people do what they say they're going to do, right? And to me, that's like, when we talk about linking our faith, that's like, okay, well, that's integrity, It makes me think of the verse of like, let your yeses be yeses and your no's be no's. And I think like top down, that's integrity. And so if people can learn that when you say you're going to do something, if you value psychological safety, how are you then backing that up? What are the things that you're doing to show that you value that psychological safety, right? And it builds the trust from the senior leaders all the way down to your teammates. And so I think those are just realistic markers, because you're right. Like, I mean, there's no way for a senior leader or, a CEO or manager to then reach everybody within a company. I mean, all you would do is be doing one-on-ones and you would never even sleep. You know what I mean? Like, that's exhausting, and no one can sustain that. That's not sustainable, So I think it's dividing it up, I think, into levels, and then maybe occasionally like stepping into meetings and just observing every now and then, if you're a top leader, of just sort of recognizing like, gosh, who are the people that you can tell when someone feels freely to speak in a meeting, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you can generally tell that, like, if people are, so maybe I would throw it back to you, like, how would you know the differences between someone freely speaking and someone not? Have you ever been in a situation like that? Sorry, I'm going to throw it back to you. But
yeah, I mean, again, this could turn into a whole different style of meeting here. No, I mean, what you said earlier with body language, I don't know if I'm exactly going to answer. You're used to that with me though, but the interweaving of like knowing your people, and we talk a lot about body language, but I think it kind of interweaves with knowing our people of like, okay, well, when this person has a certain kind of body language, it's probably just them like processing stuff, you know? But I would say if it's where I don't maybe know that person as well, I think what you said of like checking in, probably not in front of everyone, but checking in with that person. But then there are other people who it's like, okay, I know this person's body language, like they are shutting down, you know, and checking in a different way there. So I think body language is really just what came to my mind in your question. A lot of like nonverbal things, or what am I used to with this person? Like what's their norm and how is this maybe acting outside of their norm?
Yeah.
Okay. It resonated for me because when you talked about that, the individualization of the safe space, because I've struggled with that as a senior leader, right? So I'm an owner and a founder of the businesses that I have the privilege of being a part of. And I'm like, this is a safe place. I look and I'm seeing all of these people who I see thriving and feeling safe, but then we may have somebody who's psychologically, right? You talked about perception. They're not experiencing it that way. And I'll be like, that doesn't make sense to me. How could it be? But that dynamic to watch for, I would say process, you guys talking about body language, like in a meeting, process versus content, like not what are they saying, but how are they saying it? How's the body language in it? That was a unique aspect, just thinking that through. And then you wove it. I'm just active listening and tying it to the faith piece because of the fact that you said the trust, and it's really us having the integrity to do what we say we're going to do. So if I am the owner and or leader, if one of our listeners is the CEO, you're not going to be able to a certain scale point. And it actually is pretty quick. Especially if you got remote people, it can get harder. If you got people who are in the field, some of our businesses, we have reps that are at a hospital a majority of the time. You're not going to be with everybody all the time. But when we say we're going to do something, doing it, or if you can't do it, communicate that you can't do it or why. So that integrity piece will build the trust that creates the safe space, which of course, having integrity is foundational to us integrating our faith into a business. So that was what I heard you say. Did I hear it right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well done.
Thank you. Okay. So let me ask this, because we're talking about safe place. Aaron framed it well. I think, I believe a optimal work environment is going to be like a Venn diagram, which Aaron's always drawn up and showing me great Venn diagrams and stuff, but like of performance and dignity, where there's this matching in the middle. Because again, it's a business, right? And as a business, you've got to be profitable. You do want to, you got to compete in the marketplace, but yet we need to bring dignity for our team members. So there's this balance, right? Where they overlap together. How do you bring dignity, right? We want to create safe spaces. How do you bring dignity to our employees or team members through the Christian lens when they're underperforming? So how do you balance that piece for people, any generation? If they're underperforming, how do we still provide dignity to our people?
I mean, even as a therapist, I think that the most basic answer to that is to ask the questions of like, because what I find at my offices is if I am really listening and I have a lot of empathy and they know that I care for them, if I'm asking them a question, oftentimes I will get a really insightful answer back. I would say 9 times out of 10, people they don't need you to solve their problem. They just need you to like listen, and they can sort of work themselves through it. And so being an active listener and like really having empathy and being like, all right, so I see that there's a gap here, right? We want to use really non-offensive language too. Like, I would even say underperforming probably feels a little like, ooh, I suck. Sorry, is that bad? Like I'm not great.
Mark, we have to get the explicit language. It's an explicit episode because Kay said suck. Oh, it's all over.
Have little kids who are like, all the words are bad. I don't know. I don't know what words are bad.
Oh, I don't know either. I hope that's not on the list.
Okay, good. Safe space, right?
Yeah,
we have a safe space.
That's right. That's right. I love it.
But we want to move away from like it's okay. We want to move away from like the identity of who they are, right? To the task of what they're not, where there's a gap. And so I think the dignity piece is like not saying like, you're a terrible person, you are a horrible worker, but more instead just saying like, okay, tell me where the gap is. Like, what have you been seeing? Like, what would you want to improve on? And then if they aren't getting there, obviously we can offer other things of like what we see, our own insight as leaders, but I have found that actually people are like, they're pretty aware. I mean, I don't know what you guys have found, but in my office, even so, like, I'm just like, well, or what about this? And I'll ask them a question and it's like, a light bulb goes off and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't pay attention to that at all. And it's like, okay, well, maybe if we change this piece, there will be a little bit of a domino effect,
Aaron, what are your thoughts when you hear Kay say that?
I mean, I think that's very counterculture to the norm of being in a leadership or management position I think especially in the secular business world, of asking a question instead of making a statement. So I think that's really wise and probably takes a lot more intentionality than what most people, not everyone, but maybe what most people would lean toward, asking the question instead of coming in with the statements of, okay, here's where you're missing the mark. Or even if it's real, like, here's the gap that I'm seeing, starting with the question of, what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? Or even to tie back to earlier, knowing your people well enough to know, like, is there something else going on that's playing into this?
Yeah. I think the benefit of that too is, though, long term, if that employee sticks with you because they know you value them, two things will happen. I think job performance will improve because there's so much research on like job performance and mental health and like job satisfaction and knowing what your job is and doing it well and wanting to stay in that job. Like, there's research for days on that. And then, so for one, I think they will stay with you. And two, I think if they stay with you, then they're going to be able to self-correct way easier than you having to be on top of them, always telling them what to do. Hopefully, as an adult person, they will eventually start to be able to fill in those gaps a little quicker. I mean, that's the hope, right?
Yeah.
But then we all have choices. Like, if they're not doing their job ultimately, then we have the choice as the employer then to make a different decision, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah. We do all have choices. The language matters piece. Yeah, we do all have choices. The language matters piece was really interesting to me, Kay, because I'm really, I heard that recently and I've been processing that a lot. Like, how we might have the right feedback, like we might have an accurate reading of a situation, but if we use wrong language, we'll have a disconnect in the transfer of understanding. It will not get across, especially in leadership, especially when we are publicly like saying, okay, we're Christians and we're trying to bring our faith into the business spot. I think it can even be more, I don't say be more dangerous. I just think it is ripe for misinterpretation. So if you don't, I heard the really focusing on the nuance between identity versus just like objective, right? So like, hey, we missed the mark on this objective versus like, hey, you're a failure, right? The same scenario, like that's the language matters there. Are there any other places that you've seen practically we could encourage people where that nuance of language really could make a difference in how to use it well?
Let me think. I mean, I think just in everyday language, like if you're wanting to make your environment a safe space, if you're wanting to make it psychologically safe, or, you want to improve on your mental health or the well-being or whatever, well, then the way that you talk about it is going to make a difference, right? So if you look at the values of your company and you don't see how mental health fits in any of those values, I'm going to say the nuances aren't going to matter because you don't have it infused in your culture at all. So I think how we can like infuse different language pieces will ultimately bring about some of the changes that we're wanting, Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Actually, I'm just filtering my businesses now. Thanks. That was good.
Making notes like new mission statement needed. Notes.
Yeah. Ask the question. Okay. So, we're on the same vein here, and I just want to move to another even kind of subset of questions, Kay, but I think it's in the same vein. So, again, talking to Oklahoma City leaders, right, who are trying to integrate their Christian faith. They've got influence of their business. You're even talking about infusing. That's a good word. Infusing into the DNA, like the mission, the values, to where mental health is a part of the conversation. If they're not backing that up, like what are other ways that you see businesses can practically? So like, give me like real practical things that you've seen small businesses do to support employees on mental health journeys.
Yeah. Practical steps are my love language.
Oh, okay, great. Let's get into that.
the theory of things I think is really great, but it's like, okay, but what does that even look like? What does that mean? And so
Yes.
I think a lot of, this is totally a side note, but I think a lot of people in therapy can get really bogged down with like, okay, that's a great theory. And then they leave and they're like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't know what to do now. What do
I do with my hands? What do I do with my hands? Right. It's like Ricky Bobby. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So I think one of the very practical things you can do is like have the conversation, like we talked about, like infusing it into the language. If you look at your values and you ask yourself, how does mental health fit in here? And then as a leader, the very first thing you need to do is live it out. So if you decide how mental health fits in your values and you're not living it out, well, then we're going back to the trust thing, and people aren't going to trust you because you're not doing what you say is important, right? So if you're like, hey, I think mental health is super important for my business, but then you're overworked, you let your anger come out on your employees, you have zero coping skills for being stressed, well, they're not going to see that as you actually valuing mental health. They're going to be like, oh, well, you say that, but this isn't actually safe to talk about it here. So I think leaders need to model the healthy habits. I think they need to ask themselves and share their tools. Like, hey, what I do when I'm really overwhelmed is I do X, Y, and Z. And then it becomes practical. So if a leader gets really overwhelmed and they take literally a 3-minute break, which if you look in the cost of production for your business is probably not going to make or break you, but can have a lasting impact on your employees, then that 3-minute break is going to become invaluable, right? If they say, when I get really overwhelmed, or I find myself like, I think everybody can sort of know when the rise starts to happen. Either your face gets flushed or your hand, like you can feel it. You can feel the rise. And if you don't take the time to just come back down so that you can re-enter a conversation in a healthy way, like that's what you can do, right? You can say, hey, I take a 3-minute break. I take some deep breaths. I go walk to the bathroom and I walk back. Like those are ways that I'm modeling mental health in my actual job, and those things are not going to make or break a meeting. I mean, even a meeting, if everybody takes like a timeout, this is totally a side note. There are actual wellness and emotional health programs out there for businesses. I don't know. I Googled this because I was fascinated and wanted to see what are people doing for this. And there is literally a website that has 101 emotional wellness programs for your businesses. Like it has 101 ideas on it. And I was like, oh gosh. So I started looking through what they are. And some of them cost the company money, right? Like investing in healthy living. Once a quarter, you get a budget and it goes towards different wellness things that I have to return receipts for, bringing in healthy lunch. But I think there are other things, like there was one that people said a wellness Wednesday, again, just infusing it into the culture and making it an everyday topic is a very practical thing that people can do.
Yeah.
I think there are creative people like Aaron, you're super creative. I think you could probably look at that list and make 10,000 more ideas for the company of like what it would look like to infuse some wellness programs. There's one, this one was really silly, I thought, but I mean, kind of funny, but they had recess. Like the company implemented recess.
I'd go. I say I'd go do that. Let's go have recess right now. See ya. I'm out. That's awesome.
But I was like, that's not going to cost outgoing cost. You know what I'm saying? Like everything is going to cost your company, but it's not going to be extra cost to the company to implement some of these programs. And so I think that's another really practical way. So leaders modeling it healthily, like figuring out where it fits in your values, adding these programs in are just like things that people can hold on to. And I think probably do tomorrow if they wanted to,
Yeah. That's good. Okay,
when we implement recess, will there be wall ball? Did you guys play wall ball at recess?
Yeah, only if it's after Red Rover. Only if it's after Red Rover, then we can play wall ball. I mean,
dude, wall ball was the
so
jam.
Good. Oh my gosh.
That's one of the few fights I've ever gotten in my life was over wall ball because the kid punted my tennis ball onto the roof of the school. Like
that deserved a fight.
Therapy session. It was. I was very upset. I did not.
So that might be a little like counterproductive to what I think you're going for, but I mean, really up to you.
That's Kay bringing us back in the line. Thank you for that. That's good because our recess just escalated quickly.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, actually, I'm going to use that as my segue. Now, Kay, talk to me about when businesses that you've seen, like genuinely, like Christian women or men, leaders, trying to implement mental health support for their employees actually cause more harm. like maybe the wall ball example with picking a fight where I shouldn't have, but legitimately like where people tried. So it was a genuine effort, but maybe that there was just a piece missing, or it was too much, but somehow it actually caused more harm than help for team members.
Yeah. I think I've seen this professionally and personally. I've worked in Christian organizations and obviously see it in my office and all those sorts of things. But I think overstepping, period. Overstepping beyond what is actually, you know, what you need to be doing. Becoming too involved, like moving from support to control. Like the idea is we want to stay in support. If we think of the words that we want to follow this are like joining, coming alongside, supporting. Words we don't want to attach to this are fixing, controlling, punishing, maybe even, or just overstepping, you know? So I think when it has done harm is when people feel like their employer is giving them a suggestion or fixing their problem or imposing maybe a helpful tool, but instead of like, they're not saying like, hey, have you ever thought about X, Y, and Z? Just here are some resources, and they leave it at that. Instead, what they do is they say, I think you really need to go to counseling. And then now it becomes your employer telling you what they think you need to do. And what is the employee supposed to do? They are in a lose-lose situation at that point. If they don't do what you've suggested, well, now I told you what to do and you didn't do it. And if they do it, then it's why are they doing it? You know, so instead of like leaving it into their court and letting it be, sometimes we can get too involved. And I think Christian organizations are particularly like fall into this area because I think we tend to say we care more about the well-being of our employees, and in a healthy way, that can totally be a gift, right? Like, I care about your marriage. Like, I want to see you doing well. I want your marriage to thrive. I want you to be like an awesome parent. I want you to like go home and have healthy boundaries, right? So all of that can be like extra, like, but healthy if it's left in that realm of like, these are the things I want for you, but I'm not going to like, you're not going to get punished if you're not doing them. Versus like the unhealthy version is like, again, it's like leaning into that control of like, well, if you don't do these things, then, right? There's this thing with it that like, there's going to be embarrassment or rejection or punishment if you don't, you know? And so I think in the Christian realm, we can get a little bit extra into that, you know?
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion from what I've seen.
You're like, sort of my personal opinion from what I've seen over and over again. Many times. I joke about it, but only because I know I've done it. Like I have to, with humility, admit, like with good intention, I've gone across that support to control line without malice or intent, but out of my own brokenness, my own lack of boundaries at times. And so I can empathize for the people in the spot of making that mistake, but that doesn't mean it's not amiss and isn't actually going too far. So okay, talk to me, talk to the leader who's trying, stays on the healthy side of the boundary, right? Because that's the word I would use there. It's like, where is the line, right?
Totally.
The healthy boundary. Sees something, makes suggestions, and continues to see a team member not respond. So like, not like you talked earlier, maturation happening, healing happening, going through the process. And again, we are an employer. We care deeply about our people. You're integrating your Christian faith, all these pieces, but we still are an employer. Like that's our primary role in this dynamic of employer-employee, Pete. How do you navigate that spot? Speak to that leader, encourage them, equip them when you are, I'm going to say, supporting and somebody isn't responding.
Yeah. I think my first question, sorry, I'm going to put it back on you. My first question is, well, I think you said it, the word boundary, you know, like, and inherently a boundary is knowing where you end and someone else begins, right? So if you're thinking of it in terms of as an employer, okay, is you're supporting going beyond the employer responsibility. So, I mean, of course, as like friends and people of faith and the body of Christ, like we want to see the person do the things that they need to do to get better, to find healing, to find freedom, do all of those things. And that's not our responsibility, right? Now, if they're not performing in your job, that falls within your boundary, right? If what they're doing is now being impacted into their job for sure. But then your question is more about task and not about identity.
Yeah.
So it's just really keeping that boundary line really, really clear, I think, for yourself as the leader of like, am I crossing over into where they begin, or am I staying on my side, you know?
And this is the mess. Go, Aaron, if you want to elaborate more, go
ahead.
Yeah,
I don't know. We might be saying the similar thing, but probably. Yes, I was going to express that's a mess that I don't know that we've always gotten it right, but that we've tried to navigate the last couple of years in, and I hate to bring in this word because I feel like it has a negative connotation, but even in like policies for our company of like where, exactly what you said, Kay, like where do us as an employer, like where do we end? And then just like us as Christ followers or us who care about people, like where is that line? And I don't always know that it's super easy to see where that line is. And I think, again, out of a lot of good intentions, sometimes we might fall too far on one end or the other, meaning well, but potentially crossing that line.
Yeah, it is. It is not. I mean, we want to say it's a boundary line, and a boundary line inherently is black and white, right? I mean, it's literally a line. But I think even Jesus proved this of like, there is no, like, there aren't boundary lines. You know what I mean? Like we're supposed to cross them, or we're supposed to like have freedom in that too. And so it is hard. And I think, I think when you're trying to integrate faith into your work, it does make it a little bit messy. I don't know. We have to constantly check in with ourselves about it,
Yeah. And I think one of the things, Aaron, you've helped me do this here. And one of the things we've done over the years is begin to bring in professionals like 1 degree removed from our business. Like Kay is an example where if we're in support of someone so that we can stay in our role and not need to go into what someone else's role might be for people, but create and support like, hey, this is a great resource, or hey, this is a healthy resource, or hey, here's a professional, whether it's, dietitian, psychologist, whatever it might be, the type of things where if we can stay in our place, but yet in our place of support and care and integrating our Christian faith, you can equip people, because sometimes it's just about knowing where to go, right? It's about awareness and access. And so creating awareness and access for people to get that professional, if they desire, when they desire,
right.
if, all those pieces, but not, but if it's not like, go into the market and figure that out and find somebody, that's different than like, hey, actually, here's some very trusted resources. And, so that's one thing I've seen, Aaron, you've helped lead us as an organization and our network to do really, really well over the last couple of years.
Well, I'm gonna hard shift us a little bit as Clay continues to ponder that last thought. It just felt like you were like, Aaron, you've done a lot of that. Whew, big sigh. Just thinking about all the conversations where I'm like, hey, what do you think about?
Yeah, we've had a few of those, just a few, which is why you need those people. I need those people in my life. Yes.
But I'm thankful that this episode, I mean, for good reason, has been largely on the topic of mental health. I think that's it. Even early on, Kay, when you were talking about some generational differences, I haven't done a ton of research, but the little I know is like, that's a huge generational difference in even being able to openly talk about that versus some generations ahead of us where that was kind of a taboo thing. So I love that we're leaning into the generational preference to acknowledge real things and to talk about mental health, because that's a real thing. And it's super common for people to, in different seasons, have different challenges in different ways. But here's my hard shift though. Another thing that's super common that I think is maybe less talked about than mental health right now, but probably just as big of an issue would be chronic illness. And when we're thinking about as an employer, I think a lot of times those can go hand in hand as far as like, we have an employee who maybe is going through a difficult season, whether that's with mental health or chronic illness, and maybe it's undisclosed, there's a lot of nuances there for sure. But how would you say that those play into each other as far as like mental health, chronic illness, and even from the lens of an employer, like what's our best approach to that?
Yeah.
That was a heavy question.
No, it's really good. I think it's interesting. I go through seasons where I have like themes of topics in my office. And for whatever reason, I've been in a theme of like chronic illness, which means I just have like struggling, like that is one of the pieces of their story. And I think what the hard part for me in journeying with the chronic illness is that, unlike like trauma or life circumstances that maybe tend to ebb and flow in and out of your life at different seasons, chronic illness is exactly chronic. Like it feels like there's no escape for them ever. And so it's been really interesting to have to like navigate with people through that and figure out like, okay, well, what does that mean for you? And quite honestly, most of the people, they're sick of talking about it, like they're like, they don't bring it up to their employer because one, they don't want to be seen in a different lens, or two, they don't want to, I literally had someone say, I just don't want to be a Debbie the Downer. That's what she said this last week. She was like, I just don't want to go to work and I don't want to be Debbie the Downer. So I don't talk about it. But she's literally in pain all day long, every day, or her fatigue is like super heavy one day. And then it's like, it's not as bad the next day, but then no one knows. And the expectations or the desires for her to do her job are all the same. The level of energy should all be the same, but like that is not what's happening internally with her. And so just trying to figure that out. And so I would say if you're an employer who has an employee that has disclosed they have chronic illness, is to just figure out with them, again, on the individual basis. Hopefully you have less people that have chronic illness in your program or your business, that you could just ask them, like, what is it? Like, ask them, what is it like for you? There was one person back in the fall shared with me, it was called the spoon theory. Have you guys ever heard of the spoon theory?
No.
It's not a research thing. It was simply someone's way to share with one of her friends about what it's like for her to have chronic illness, chronic fatigue. And so she used spoons, and she was like, let's say I get up every day and I have 12 spoons, and a spoon is equal to 1 unit of energy. And so she was like, getting up and taking a shower, that's probably 1 spoon. Getting ready, if you have hair drying, that's probably another spoon, right? It's 6. No, Clay, you probably don't have that issue, but it takes time and effort for your hair. But just things like that. And so, by the time you are home from your workday, you've used at least probably 6 or 7 spoons, and you only have 6 left. And so, but then if you're a parent, then you've got to like make dinner, bath, bedtime, picking up the house, like you got to do all of these things, and you have to figure out, what am I going to do with my spoons? Because I don't have enough left, right, to do all the things I need to do. And so just to empathize with that, again, to go back to what I talked about before, to like empathize with that, but then also to say like, man, if you're at an 8 today, can we give you back 3 spoons and make you not drive into work today? Can you get more work done if you stay home and you don't have to use 3 spoons to get in? You know what I mean? And so, and that's not every day, right? But there are days where it's like, those 3 spoons will just make their work. Honestly, if we're looking from a business perspective, it will make them work better, because they're not having to expend energy before they can expend energy for you. Or if they have like, something to do for their kids, and there's something, or they've said that there's something to do after work, like, can you work from home today so that you can have energy for that in the nighttime? Like, that's a way to practically value their time and their energy, knowing that it's a little bit more finite than a person who isn't struggling with chronic illness.
That's really good. I feel thankful that we don't have it all figured out, but that we are working hard to navigate what does it look like to have a flexible work schedule and a flexible work environment. I'll be honest, we didn't set out with the intention to accommodate those with chronic illness, but I'm thankful that that's the journey that we're on, so that hopefully we can do a better job accommodating that. So I would just ask a follow-up question, like, for a business that maybe hasn't started the journey of implementing a flexible work schedule or flexible work environment, whether that's working from home or different work hours or whatever that looks like, what would be your advice on like how to get started? Just a practical first step to go that direction.
First step would be, I don't know, it's weird for everybody has needs that are to just simply survey. Like maybe you just do an anonymous survey of like, like would a little bit more flexibility in our schedules be helpful to you? I can't imagine anybody would say no to that, but
no, more rigid, please.
I know. I don't want to be flexible. Because but really like, and we all know, I think we can again see the impact that even like chronic illness and like lack of flexibility would do to your mental health. Just in the same, like if you're a parent and you've got like, certain needs or doctor's appointments or things that you have to go do for your children, like you want to be able to do those things. And if you can't do those things or it stresses you out, that's going to impact your job performance. And so it really, I think from a business perspective, again, we want to be able to say like, we want to set you guys up to do what you can do so that you feel valued in the work that you're doing. And so that, honestly, we're getting good job performance, I mean, at the end of the day, it's business. And so, but like, I don't think most people go into a job thinking it would be really awesome if I suck today, or like, I'm going to feel really good if I don't get my work done. Like most people aren't functioning like that. And if they are functioning like that, I imagine they're not going to be working for you very long. So the question becomes like, if we zoom out and we say, okay, this person really wants to do their best, they really want to work hard, this is the gap that they're finding. Like maybe that's the survey. Maybe you ask, what's the hardest gap? Is it making sure that you're in the office by 8 a.m. and we can move that to 8:30? Is it saying like, okay, getting out at 5 p.m. so now I'm in traffic for an hour and a half. I don't want to get home till 7. Could we back up? Could you work an hour from home? If you leave at 3, could you work from 3 to 4:30 and then you don't have to be in traffic? Like, I feel like there's ways that people can practically say, where's the hardest gap? And then what can we do about that?
It's good. It's practical. Okay. It's applicable. Come on, Kay.
Practical, my love language.
Practical, the love language. 101 ways, right? 101 ways.
I love that site.
Yeah, that was good. Kay, any final thoughts that you would want to share with our listeners? This has been rich and helpful. I got pages full of notes for myself that I'm going to be processing through after. But any final thoughts that you would want to share with our viewers and our listeners?
The fact that people they're listening and asking the question, I'm like, that's me. Like, I care about like that. So to like have every single thing up, find out, now in place to like just take a small and talk about it, it's like awesome and to get work for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. We've got a verse I'm going to read before we close out this episode. I'll read it and then we'll finish today. It's actually from Jonah. The inspiration verse today was from Jonah. Jonah 2. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars close upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit. Oh, Lord, my God, when my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. You're not alone, listeners. I just had the thought there. I just want to encourage everyone. You're not alone. Whatever your journey is, wherever you are on that path, know that you're not alone. Thank you for joining us today, Kay. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Kay.
Yes, thank you. Again, thank you for being with us. And viewers and listeners, until we are together again next week, choose life.
Thanks for tuning into our show. If you want to learn more about how you can integrate your faith into your business, download our integrated business guide for free by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.